All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the 306 Fantasy Football Podcast. We are here recording episode number 90 after a nice little stint break there. I know we usually take about a four week break or so following the Super Bowl or the week following after the Super Bowl, sorry, and just kind of recharge the batteries. But following the conclusion of the school year, and I'll get into a little bit here, but Zach was on a nice little vacay. Armand and I were battling with some dual duties between dad duties and school duties, or doing our masters and stuff like that too. And it seemed like a decent little time to take a break and recharge before firing up for the busy fantasy football season. So before we get into our episode here, episode 90, we're going to be talking about breakout players heading into the 2023 campaign. Let's do a little catch up. I know I hinted at it already, but Zach, nice little vacation. Got some, I just finished saying, some really, really warm weather, but maybe tell us a little bit about your little bit of break you've had so far.
Yeah, like you said, my wife and I, we went to Italy for just over 2 weeks there, and kind of did like all the touristy stuff that you would expect people to do while they're in Italy. And I did some other really neat stuff, and got to experience like some of the hottest weather that I've ever been in, I guess. Couple days over 40, so uh yeah, real sweaty, but it was well worth it.
Over under on how much gelato you had there, Zach.
Oof. If you said two a day, you'd be pretty accurate.
Attaboy, attaboy. For those of you doing the mental math at home, we'll just move along. Armin, how about you? The little break. I know we finished up some school and you had some masters. You had a big paper that was due. I think it was the last day of our classes, actually. You had a massive paper and you said you're enjoying some dad life, but how's the little break been treating you?
It's been not too bad. Unfortunately, I haven't been up to too much though as well because I'm not only doing the dad duties, but I had a rugby game the first week of our break here and ended up bruising my ribs. So I've been limping around a little bit around the house, trying to grit my teeth and not let the wife know how injured I actually was.
It's not that bad. It's not that bad, I swear.
Yeah. But it was good. It's been a lot of fun. I played my first game back last week and played the scrum half and if you guys who don't know rugby at all, it's pretty much you just grab the ball and pass it out. So I wasn't running into contact at all. And when I had to make tackles, I was just kind of holding guys up rather than going to the ground because it hurt every time I went to the ground on a guy. But it was worth it. It was a lot of fun, and glad to be back doing the pod, and excited for the fantasy season coming up. We're in training camp now, and we got our first exhibition game this week. It's exciting, man.
Yeah, I'm thrilled. With that break, I completed my master's degree, so I am like completely done school now. So like if I was not all in on fantasy football season before, oh boy, look out, because those Sundays are going to be uninterrupted. I took a picture, I put it up on my Facebook there. I put Wells in a Detroit Lions onesie or a little, like one of those diaper shirts. Oh man, I just picturing like in 3 weeks' time, we'll just be sitting on the couch watching football, and it's gonna be deadly. So I'm really really looking forward to that. Got a big golf tournament coming up this weekend, so finally getting back on the golf course, which is gonna be nice. Been few and far between, obviously, with dad duties and with masters stuff like that. It's been difficult, but try and get out there as much as I can. But renovations are gonna be takeover. Got to put up a new fence. I got to do my shingles, and then I'm also still doing some like minor stuff too. So for the most part, that'll be the end. We'll be back to work, which I'm trying not to think about too much. But regardless, let's get into things a little bit here. So a couple things. We are currently, and maybe I'll be able to put up some stuff on some social medias here in the next little bit. We're currently doing our EC5 draft. It's a charity draft that Zach kind of got us involved with last season, and it's based out of Europe. And it's kind of a little similar to like the Scott Fish or something we do, where the money that is raised goes towards charity. So we're in the process of doing that draft right now. I'm not going to hint too much at our quick question of the day, but things are going a little slower than we'd like, and actually worked out somehow perfectly. What'd you say, Zach? There's about what how many entrants are there this year? Do you know off the top of your head or even ballpark?
I think he said 300 was the goal.
So even say for a round number, say there's 300 people. Somehow Armand and I end up in the same division of 12 people. So some way, somehow Armand and I out of 300 people all across Europe and a little bit of I guess not too much out of North America, but somehow me and Armand are head to head in the draft right now. But which leads me into my talking point.
Just another league that we have to go against each other, man.
Yeah, exactly. It's not like we're in enough of them. Hey, Armand. Transitions me perfectly into just to keep in mind that our charity league information is going to be coming out shortly. Same as always, we're looking to tweak things up and looking to make things a little bit different each year to make it fresh, make it fun. So if you at home are listening, if you have any recommendations or anything that think, hey, in my league I did this, it was a lot of fun, maybe you should consider doing that, fire away at us and we'll put something on our Instagram story there too, that you can comment and share things that you like, because within a couple weeks here we'll be sharing that information, as well as starting up our draft for our charity league too, which will be very, very exciting. So without further ado, we will get into our 22 fresh quick question of the week. And this one, just because we have lots of content to get into, we're going to keep this one a little bit short and sweet. But the question is, what is your least favorite fantasy football rule or setting? And I know we hinted at this one a little bit, but Zach, let's start with you.
Typically I would describe myself as a pretty patient person, but when it comes to fantasy football drafts, especially, I guess I'm not too patient. So the setting that really grinds my gears would be slow drafts. And I know for a draft like the EFFC that we just mentioned, with people all over the world, you kind of need to have a slow draft with obviously people living different lifestyles and time zones. But yesterday the draft started, I don't know, I think 6 a.m. our time, and I've only had 2 picks, and that's not a bad thing. I've had worse days with Scott Fish and EFFC in the past, but you'd like to see it a little bit quicker. And then I guess kind of tailing onto that, whenever possible, you would obviously want to have an in-person draft, especially with your like your buddy drafts or your kind of like your city drafts, I guess.
Yeah, there's nothing beats the in-person draft. Nothing beats it.
Oh, yeah.
Like I know when we get together with our work draft we all used to be a part of, and you're razzing each other, it's a lot of fun. The one thing, like, we're in the process of possibly within the next year, 2 years, 3 years, maybe even 4 years, who knows how long, our dynasty is going to reset. And like I was just thinking, how much fun could that be? Because if you can get somebody on tilt in a dynasty draft, that's years and years of pain because you caused on an in-person draft. Like, could you imagine panic picking somebody, like, for example, like, I don't know, like you panic picked Cam Akers in the second round because guys are razzing you because you took a terrible running back pick, and like, I don't even know. Like, I think that'd be so much fun for years and years to come. You can just say, like, yeah, that guy's on your roster because we are razzing you the whole evening. I think that would be just absolutely delightful. But Armand,
for dynasty in-person draft, how long would you put the timer though?
I think you got to go like 3 minutes. No, well, I guess it depends. Like, in my head, tell me if I'm wrong with this. I think you go 5 minutes per pick, but you start during like kind of early afternoon, morning, so it'll be a long time. But then you would have those sidebars where it's like, hey, Armand, let's go to the side here. I'm going to trade this third round pick. I'll give you a 5th round and a 7th for a 2026 first as well. You know what I mean? Like, you could have those sidebars.
Yeah,
you need like 5 minutes per pick. But could you imagine ripping in and out of the garage? Like, let's have a sidebar in your guest bathroom quick. I gotta offer you something. Like,
yeah, I like that, actually. I like that, especially because it's dynasty, so you're only doing it when the league resets, right? So it'd be an event that happens rarely, and then you can make a big deal out of it. I like that, actually, a lot.
Swoop in too, like Zach could hear us making an offer, and Zach could just swindle in like he normally does, and somehow offer a slightly better deal and undercut me, which is pretty standard. But
just break Lexi's nail room door as I kick it in.
Yeah, damn it! I know I can beat that offer. I know it. Just let me know.
Some of the trades I've seen you make, Jordan, I'm like, man, I could have beat that. What the hell?
Yeah, just surprised Zach didn't swindle in earlier. That's all I got to say. Armand, what's your rule or your setting that you wish to change?
So I couldn't think of a specific rule, so I kind of more went with just something that bugs me in fantasy that I wish there could be a rule for is I hate when a guy gets injured in the first quarter of a game and you can't do anything about it. Like it ruins your fantasy week, you get a loss, and like we talk about trying to emulate it kind of like real football sometimes with like trying to make the quarterback position more valuable but not too turbocharged and everything like that, right? Well, on a real football game, as a real coach or real manager, guy gets injured, you put the next guy in. So I wish there was some sort of setting where you could like those bench players that you have that aren't in your starting lineup, like if you don't want to do best ball, you could pick like one or two of those guys to be the sub, like a sub spot,
Yeah.
where if a guy gets injured in the first quarter or first half of a game, the guy that's setting your sub spot on your lineup gets slotted into the position
Like
and gets you the points.
you get carried away, but I mean, even like one or two, it could be feasible where like if one guy gets hurt, whoever's in your one spot and then your two spot, where just like setting your lineups like a flex spot, you put that guy in there. That if there's a guy that gets injured, say within the first 10 snaps or some arbitrary number, that
Yeah.
you just automatically just fill it in, just like almost like an insurance policy.
Yeah. Could even make it like a depth chart. Rank your bench at the beginning of each week, 1 to 4, however big your depth
It
depth
could get super
is.
cheap where it's like just grab your next best player off your bench, and it's like could be like Jermichael Hasty who put up 20 points, and it's like you would never start Jermichael Hasty, but somehow you get this like cheap rule. But I could see something like that where, I mean, it takes a little bit of the randomness out of fantasy football, but it does make it a little more like I guess almost fair in a sense. You said more realistic to the game of football.
Yeah.
The one I put down here, and I'm fortunate enough. I think actually all of us are fortunate enough that we're in a league. The only one I say would be close to it is maybe in Armand's league, where there's no such thing as a trade veto vote, or on ESPN how they have the veto button. If trade goes through, you can press deny, 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 and enough guys vote on it that they can deny a trade. And especially in Dynasty redraft, I still don't like it, but I can see the path of to why people might want. So the guy just that's in last place completely bails on his team for first place, and not necessarily collusion, but it's just real cheap. But if two teams are equally, making a trade, one person sees the path of how they make their roster better, and the other sees the path of how they make their roster better, and they agree upon a trade. It shouldn't matter what the other people in the league decide. Like Armin even just said, "Oh, I saw that trade that went through. I think I could have beat that." That honestly, that's probably my thought process on every single trade that ever goes through. It's like, "Oh man, I probably could have beat that. Why didn't I? If I would have known, I could have made an offer." And if a guy's pissed off enough, or if it's a competitor, he can say, "Yeah, I want to veto it because either it makes my competitor better, or I could, you know, swoop in and make a better offer or whatever." The only time I ever think a trade should be vetoed is if there is clear collusion that was done, and that's up to a commissioner to make that decision. That it should have nothing to do with anybody else within the league to make that ruling. But maybe Armin, you want to share like how you do yours, because that'd be the closest league I'm in where there is some sort of like veto situation.
Yeah, so I have it set so that the commish can veto it or has to put the trade through once a guy makes the trade. And pretty much when a trade comes through, I announce it to the league, say if you have any like big issues with this trade at all, you have to put it into the chat within the next, I usually give 24 hours notice. But it also depends on when the trade went through, because if it's like Saturday evening and the guy wants to play that guy on Sunday, then I'll make the time clock a little bit shorter. But yeah, give the guys time to speak up if they think there's something fishy going on, and then I just put it through if nobody says anything. So
Still on the same lines where it's that clear collusion, or there's something that what's going on, so it's not just processed through. So
yeah,
that's the one thing I
exactly.
kind of like about it. I will say it was suspenseful when we made that trade. So I think that might have been the first trade to actually get made through in that league. And then, man, it was suspenseful because it's like, hey, I got 3 hours until somebody like complains enough that this trade doesn't get through. And like, that trade clearly made my team substantially better that year, but I
Yeah.
completely forfeited my future. And I was looking
Well,
at that trade now. Holy man, did he clean house? Like he gets to keep Garrett Wilson as like a 16th round pick. And like
woo,
so many aspects of that trade is like, oh boy, I made the wrong choice. I didn't make the playoffs. So I really future real bad. Yeah, made a mistake on that one. But
Yeah.
I don't know, and it's
Yeah.
the I kind of segue into this portion of like we want your recommendations because there's parts in leagues that people like and people don't like, and obviously our charity league, there's not a lot on the line. You know, we got some signed memorabilia, we got some fun stuff to give away, but at the end of the day, it's for charity and it's for fun. So we want to make this league as enjoyable as possible, and we want people talking about like, oh man, we had so much fun. This was unique. This was unique. This was different. Not, oh yeah, they vetoed all my trades and the draft took 14 hours and all these different things. So we'll try and make this year's league as fun as possible for those of you at home. Transitioning here, there's lots going on now. I know in the last episode we talked about it was kind of that phase where we were waiting from OTAs and going into actual training camp where things are going to start to happen. And we're at the point here where things are starting to happen.
I've just been handed an urgent and horrifying news story.
I'm Ron Burgundy.
So we've been away for I think 4 weeks. So I'm not going to go all the way back to 4 weeks of news and all this, running back arbitration or running back Zoom meetings and all the major pieces or minor pieces of news that have happened over the last 4 weeks. Instead, what I'm going to talk about is the things that have happened just in the most recent, like last couple of days, and the big things. So the first one is Tim Patrick tore his Achilles. He just came off an ACL injury last season. Got paid big bucks. Was going to most likely be a formative role and a sneaky pick for a lot of people in fantasy drafts. Torn Achilles, season ender, quite likely, quite possible a career ender at this point, but only time will tell on that one. Zach Moss, broken arm, expecting to 6 weeks. Not that a lot of us were drafting Zach Moss anyways, but it just makes the back more clear if you're looking for that RB2 in that backfield. This one happened, I think, a week and a half ago now, but we got a little clarity. Joe Burrow has a grade 2 calf strain, expected to miss several weeks is how they're classifying it. If we see him before week 1, I'd be incredibly surprised. I still don't even know if we will see him in week 1. So that's something that we're going to continue to monitor. And obviously I'm starting to get back on the old social media train a little bit more and a little better now that I have less distractions. But this last two, these ones are super interesting because we are waiting to see how this would shake out through training camp. Would it be a committee? Would Kenneth Walker continue carrying the load and then Charbonnet is going to get sprinkled in maybe, third down situations? Are they going to be a 50-50 split? We don't know. Now nobody has a clue and nobody's going to know until we enter the season because Kenneth Walker is nursing a groin injury. And if there's anything we know through experiences of fantasy football, the groin injuries, those linger for players throughout the entire season. When you tweak your groin in training camp, there's very few situations where that player is not nursing that throughout the entire duration of the year. Now, so that's like, okay, well, that means perfect opportunity for Zach Charbonnet. He's going to take over and he might get more work. We got some clarity. No, he has a shoulder injury and is already listed as out indefinitely. So the timeline is up in the air. When you get that indefinitely stamp, that's never a good sign for somebody that's going to miss the entire training camp and most likely start of the football season too. So now we're in a situation where we had two really good backs and you didn't know which one you wanted to now there's none of them. And obviously Seattle's going to have to either bring somebody in or we're going to see some of those fringe 3s and 4s that were just kind of depth pieces on that roster take a little bit more of a takeover on that in that backfield. But there's no person to rather ask his opinion on this one because I know it sucks because he has both of them on his dynasty roster. But what's your thoughts? I don't know if you've got to take a look at too much of this here yet, Armand, but what are your thoughts on what Seattle's going to have to do moving forward with these two backs?
Yeah, I haven't been able to dig too deep into it. Kenneth Walker, like you said, the groin injury can linger a bit, but Kenneth Walker is still young, right? He's only 22 yet, I believe. If they let him take his time during training camp, they know what he is, they know what he can do, right? It's not like he needs to be in full time at training camp here. And if they really let him heal and take care of himself, the positive is that he could be ready week 1 and available and back to full health. The problem is with those injuries, right, is if a guy tries to come back too early before he's fully healthy, and then it lingers and lingers and lingers. So I think at least it's beginning of training camp, first week, they can let him heal up for 4 weeks here, and hopefully come September he's good to go. Charbonnet, I haven't looked at what exactly that shoulder injury is, but I would think that a shoulder injury is pretty hard, especially when you have to take those tackles on the shoulder, when you're making that contact, initiating it with your shoulder, especially the way Charbonnet runs, right? He's kind of a bruiser. So that's a little bit more serious, but I think I'm still high on Kenneth Walker going into this season. A little bit of hesitation with the injury, but I'm not knocking him way down the board just yet.
Yeah, it's going to be real interesting because behind those two are DJ Dallas, Kenny McIntosh, Roderick Thompson Jr., Bryant Kobach, and Wayne Tulapapa.
The fortunate thing, at least,
not familiar with a lot of those names, DJ Dallas and Lift, and I'm not super.
Yeah.
So it might mean a lot more heavy passing offense, at least in the first couple weeks, until, like you mentioned, Kenneth Walker gets healthy, or they sign one of those veteran, I can't get a job type running backs. I don't know if they'd be going after, like Leonard Fournette or Kareem Hunt. I think that's too high of that end. But there might be guys like, I know Melvin Gordon, I think he just signed with,
he's
Baltimore. But that type of
Yeah.
back, somebody that can fill the role for like kind of how New Orleans picked up Mark Ingram last year. Like those types of backs that could kind of fill the role for a couple weeks until that injury is healed, but still doesn't put a lot of confidence in that running game where might be pass heavy, especially with the addition of Jackson Smith and Jigba. Maybe he gets introduced into the offense a little more frequently than we thought right at the start of the season. So,
and the fortunate thing, at least, is DJ Dallas has shown competency in the passing game. He's shown to be a decent pass blocker and pass catcher. So at least you're able to put him on the field in those passing downs and know you got a confident back, but nothing spectacular that's going to break open the game.
Yeah, exactly. Anything to add there, Zach, before we continue on to our segment of the week?
No, not too much. Don't know a dang thing about any of those guys that you mentioned aside from DJ Dallas, so not too much to add there.
Yeah, it's bad when I'm stuttering over names trying to figure out how to pronounce them. They're not real familiar guys unless you're doing a real deep dynasty league by any stretch of imagination. But we'll get into our segments of the episode here, and this one's a fun one because we've surpassed OTAs, and we're now about a week into training camp for most teams at least, and we get a feel of guys we are excited for going into the season. We got to look at those guys in training camp or guys that we weren't sure about and see them in training camp, and then they start to progress. So guys that we're pretty excited about going into the upcoming fantasy season for a breakout season. Some of these guys, we've seen glimpses of it. They've shown flashes, but we're expecting them to take that massive big step forward into either the spotlight or into some sort of significant relevance. So we'll start with Armand. Looks like for the most of us, we went one guy from each different position. So that's pretty good here. So we'll start with Armand with your player number one.
All right. My player number one is Justin Fields. And I know he broke out a little bit last year, but that was with his legs. I'm predicting that he's going to break out with his arm a little bit too here. Now, you look at similar guys in the past, they've all progressed with their arms, been able to figure it out a little bit better. And I don't think Fields is going to be an exception to that rule. When you look at like Jalen Hurts, Lamar Jackson has progressed in his passing throughout his career. I think Fields, he has that base running ability. And you look at last season's Chicago Bears, Darnell Mooney, as good of a receiver he is not an alpha. They have an alpha now. Their third receiver is Chase Claypool, which I know a lot of people are low on him, but man, he was dealing with an injury last year, plus getting traded and trying to learn a new playbook and get his connection with Justin Fields figured out. I think he'll be a very viable third option for Justin Fields this year. To have that guy who's a home run threat as your third wide receiver is actually pretty big. So you look at the weapons he has now, and then his another year figuring it out, learning how to play in the NFL. I think Fields is going to wake up a little bit with his arm, and he has the arm talent. He has to figure out when to hit the guys that are open and get a little bit better at that stuff, which is something I think he can learn, right? And So I feel like Fields is going to be a breakout player with his arm.
Yeah, when you saw this, I was like, oh man, he kind of already like low key broke out, but like at the same time, it was just like you said with the legs. So I was glad that's kind of the route you ended up going with that, because he's a guy that's getting drafted like pretty high. So there's that expectation of that said breakout. So it's just a matter of, is he going to step up to the plate Lamar Jackson style and saying, you know, I can run and watch me, I can start passing even though you don't think I can, or is he going to RG3 it and not destroy his knee, but just not take that next step forward? You know, we've already seen him with the legs and the arm needed to follow. So
yeah, and the thing is as well is like, I know he's getting drafted high, but there's a lot of fantasy analysts out there who are not liking how high he's going and think he's going too high. Where I'm more on the train of, I think he's in the right spot right now.
I'm gonna follow you because you had a quarterback, I got a quarterback, so I'll do the same thing. And I'm in a similar boat as Armand, where my guy, you could argue, had the breakout at the end of the season. His start of the first half of the season was garbage. Second half of the year was pretty good, if not great. And then his performance in the playoff game is the exact same. His first half was hot garbage, like arguably the worst half of football you could possibly have in a playoff game. And then his second half was an electric come from behind win, one of the biggest in NFL history. So mine is Trevor Lawrence. The guy, his first season was a complete write-off, a complete train wreck. The Jacksonville offense, the organization was just abysmal. And then they started kind of getting the ball moving a little bit last year. So last year, in a sense, was kind of almost like his rookie campaign with a competent OC, a competent organization. We saw the ball moving. Now Trevor Lawrence is in that spot where he's getting kind of drafted around, I don't know, like maybe 7 through 10 range of quarterbacks. 10 might be a little bit low, but I'm expecting Trevor Lawrence to finish as the top 5 quarterback. I'm looking at his projections, and this projections are based off of MFL. They're projecting him to have about the same season he had in 2022. Last season he had 4,113 passing yards. They're expecting him to complete another 13 passing yards. 13 more. That's the jump they're expecting him to make, which is not a jump at all. That's like one additional completed pass. They're expecting him to have less passing touchdowns, and they're expecting him to have more lost fumbles, and they're expecting him to have less rushing touchdowns. So when you look at the grand scheme of things, his yardage is going to go up slightly, but they're expecting very similar to campaign that he had in 2022, which, like I said, was a tale of two very different stories. The addition of new weapons, as well as retaining the weapons that he's already built that connection with, this offense is just going to take a step moving forward. Which means obviously if the whole offense is moving forward, so is Trevor Lawrence. And I think this season we're going to see him really take the reins as that clear-cut 101, one of the best prospects we've seen since Andrew Luck. And he's going to take those reins and move forward as in the running with Justin Herbert, in the runnings with Patrick Mahomes, in the runnings with Josh Allen as those top quarterbacks you really want to draft. I think what will help him take that up a little bit is just having a couple more of those rushing touchdowns in the goal line. You can do some creative things. I think Doug Peterson's going to be able to get the ball moving in the red zone with some creativity. We saw how creative he could be in Philadelphia. I think that creativity is just going to continue on with this Jacksonville offense. Now, like I said, he's already being drafted as like the 7, 8, 9 quarterback. I think the sky's the limit for Trevor Lawrence upcoming season, and he's going to solidify himself as a premier talent in the NFL. Zach, I think you got a quarterback here too, so I think all three of us took a cue right off the hop. So let's hear what you have to say about yours.
Yeah, you bet. Both of you guys identified quarterbacks that last year finished in the top 10 amongst quarterbacks. But the previous year in 2021, both of those guys finished outside of the top 20, with Lawrence at 22 and Fields at 31. So the guy that I have decided to talk about, Kenny Pickett. Last year he was quarterback 20 on the season, I believe. And I'm looking for maybe not that same kind of jump where, this time next year we're talking about Kenny Pickett as a top 10 fantasy quarterback, but I think we're certainly talking about Kenny Pickett differently next year. Not as the butt of most jokes as he is right now. Kenny Pickett was certainly not a world beater at the start of his rookie season last year, where he'd have multiple 2, 3, 4 turnover games. A couple games with 3 interceptions, a couple games with several fumbles. So I think that bad start last year kind of just carried on throughout the year in the minds of a lot of fans and fantasy players. But if you look at the numbers last year, he really finished the year strong, and he finished it off on a good note. Certainly compared to the start of his year, where by the end of the year, 4 of the last 5 games were top 20 finishes amongst fantasy quarterbacks. And I think that's going to be about where we're looking at this year, where he's going to be comfortably in that top, I think, 15 range as a fantasy quarterback. So maybe not a person that you want to start every week, but somebody that you could confidently start based on either injury or a bye week fill in, and somebody that I think is going to have a lot of value in a super flex format. So Pickett has 2 things going for him that I think a lot of these young quarterbacks have going for them as well. Pickett can contribute on the ground. Last year, he did have 3 games with 30 or more rushing yards. 1 game where he had over 50 rushing yards. So while that's not Hurts, that's not Jackson, that's not Field level of production, that is an extra 3, 4, 5 points on the ground. And if you can punch one in to the end zone, that's a lot more fantasy points for you as well. And looking at guys, like you said, like Lawrence and Fields, they have surrounded themselves, or they've been surrounded with fantasy producing receivers. And I think that's something else that Pickett has. He has Johnson, who had that injury scare last week, but from everything that I've seen, it seems like was more of just a scare than something that we have to worry about. He does have George Pickens, who could understandably be on this list of breakout players. Allen Robinson, that's kind of up to you to decide what you think about Allen Robinson. Has a good tight end in Pat Freiermuth, and then Najee Harris on the ground as well. So he does have weapons that he can get the ball to. I wouldn't be shocked if Pickett, if not this year, maybe the following year, follows a path similar to Daniel Jones, where people aren't sold on him, but after year 3, year 4, he's getting like a top 10 finish easily based on producing through the air, but as well as on the ground. So Kenny Pickett, maybe not so much an every week starter in 1 quarterback leagues, but somebody that I definitely have my eye on in 2 quarterback settings.
The funny thing is, as you were talking, I was thinking, this is Daniel Jones. Like, this is the guy that's his path, is Daniel Jones. And then you're like, well, you know what the comparison is? Daniel Jones. I was like, hey, we're on the same with, like, Zach. But punching it in, like, I think back to his very first start, and was that in week 6? Hold on, I had it in front of me and I just lost it. Sorry, week 4, he went in partway through the game, threw 3 interceptions, lost a fumble, but scored the only 2 touchdowns when it was on the ground. I think the one was a bit of a break-off run, and then another one was a QB sneak on like the 2-yard line or something like that. So he definitely has that capability. And you still have, like you said, strong weapons in the offense, guys that can catch the ball. And you got Najee Harris, who's still a very, very competent, capable back. So it's a good offense, and it's just a matter of him taking that leap forward, which I think, like you said, that career path of Daniel Jones, I think, is one that I think very well could be mirrored for Kenny Pickett. All right, going into our second one here, Armand, who do you have as your second breakout candidate of the 23 campaign?
All right, so I guess he doesn't necessarily fall as breakout, but more of a sleeper pick here, because that's what I was going with, and it's my guy, my favorite player to talk about on the podcast, Rashad Penny. He's in Philly now, which is a team that does like to run the ball, and his competition in the backfield is DeAndre Swift. And I know Swift is a good back, but you just got to look at Penny's work over his career when he is healthy, and that's the big thing, is when he is healthy. And I know that's why he's so far down on draft boards. But man, is he efficient and explosive and a good running back when he plays. And I just don't see Swift beating him out for those early down touches. And so I think Rashad Penny is going to have a great season in Philadelphia if he stays healthy, and is well worth drafting at his current ADP. And yeah, that's my 2 cents on it.
Okay, well, here's my question. No, small rebuttal. Are you concerned about Kenneth Gainwell at all? Because I think he's being incredibly undervalued.
I like Kenneth Gainwell in an NFL perspective, but I think like just Rashad Penny and DeAndre Swift are a tier above him. Not to knock Gainwell, like I think Gainwell is a good running back, but he just doesn't have that explosiveness in the run game that Penny has. Where he does excel is more in where Swift does with the passing game. So I think if anything, Gainwell will eat into Swift's workload and not necessarily Penny's.
It's funny because I think Penny got first touches in training camp, but they have him listed as number 3 in the depth chart. Like it has like an R. Like I use R lads for depth chart. It's the most up to date. I find him more like, I don't know, arbitrary, not art. Like it's like kind of like an outside lens, not and it's up to date a little more than ESPN. But they have DeAndre Swift as 1, Kenneth Gainwell as 2, and Rashad Penny as 3. So that's kind of interesting to see. I think you can basically put right now any of those 3 in the starting role, and people would argue against or for that individual. That's just how up in the air it is. But
yeah,
ones where if you make that pick, and I think all those guys are kind of going around, I don't know, like the 6th round ish or later. I think best if you're in Superflex or not, but those are ones where it's lightning in a bottle if you hit the right one. But it could be a really bad pick if you make the wrong one too. But
yeah, it's a conundrum that we face every year with at least 1 or 2 teams where it's this team, whoever gets the touches in the backfield is going to be great in fantasy, but we don't know who it's going to be. And sometimes it just ends up being a 3-headed monster and you don't want any part of it. But if you end up getting the guy that's going to be the monster in that backfield, you're loving it.
So I'm going to transition here into my second guy. And this one, if you would have asked me about, I don't know, maybe 3 weeks ago, I would have been just hot and bothered, still so in love with this guy. And there's a little bit of cold water been splashed on him with the pickup of DeAndre Hopkins. But my breakout candidate for number 2 is Chigoziem Okonkwo. Chig is what it kind of goes by, Chig Okonkwo. He is going into his 2nd year as a tight end for the Tennessee Titans. And for a lot of people, this might be a deep cut. This might be one where you are unfamiliar with this name unless maybe you play Dynasty or watched a lot of Tennessee games last season. And he got put into the spotlight based off of pure necessity last season because there was nobody healthy in the entire offense. Last season, he put up 32 receptions, 450 yards, 3 touchdowns, and then he was used a couple times in the rush game, just 3 times. So nothing incredible to take home. But 46 targets for your rookie campaign as a tight end is pretty good. And the reason I really, really liked Chig going into this upcoming season is because there was not a lot to be had around there. There was Chig, there was Treylon Burks, and then that was pretty much end of list. So he was going to be used based off pure necessity. And right now I'm even looking at, this is a dynasty ranking I'm looking at right now. He's only owned in 70% of dynasty leagues, which I think is a damn shame because after week 1, that ownership is going to skyrocket. I think he is going to continue on the success he had. I was just looking at the depth chart of that football team, and it is not a lot to write home. They have DeAndre Hopkins, Treylon Burks, who still in his own is unproven due to injuries, and then there's Chig Okonkwo. Derrick Henry, obviously, that's the focal point of that offense, but they use so much play action where it just creates these opportunities for other players to be open. And I do like Chig. Now, am I saying like I did before where Trevor Lawrence is going to make that jump into like a top 5 option? No, Chig Okonkwo is not going to be a top 5 option next year. But this is a guy that late in drafts, almost undrafted in your redraft leagues, that you can put on your roster and you could be confident with riding him throughout the season, just because of how well and how successful he was in his rookie campaign. So I think he's going to have a breakout season. I know a lot of fantasy rankings have him around ranked 17 to 20, which is not the greatest. Obviously, if you have the tight end 20 on the season, that's not going to win you fantasy championships. I think he's going to finish somewhere around the tight end, I would say 11 through 14, which still isn't a league breaker, but definitely is going to help you win your championships when you can get him as almost a free square at the end of your drafts. Zach, your breakout player number 2.
This might be one that, shoot, even in a few weeks, you might be thinking, what the heck was this guy talking about?
Don't worry, Zach. I was right there with you, buddy.
So Jaylen Warren, backup running back to the Pittsburgh Steelers, currently being drafted as running back 50. So this is, again, kind of like you mentioned, a bit of a deep cut, but this is somebody that I think might have, certainly is going to have handcuff value this season if you are the manager that has Najee Harris, but could have some standalone value as well. And this is all just based on some maybe like advanced metrics more than anything else. So Jaylen Warren was a undrafted free agent last year. And I think that in itself may have a little bit to do with the usage that he got last year. As the season went on, his usage did increase. But of course, it's easy to see why he didn't get a lot of touches early on. Undrafted guy, rookie, and he was playing behind Najee, who was their first round pick 2 seasons ago. But last year in his rookie campaign, Jaylen Warren ranked 5th in the league in missed tackles per touch, 12th in the league yards per carry, and 16th in the league in breakaway run rate, which is based on runs of 15 yards or more. So when he's had his opportunities, he's done very well with them. Armand talks a lot about running backs being efficient. And to me, Jaylen Warren seems like he's a very efficient player while on the field. If you do yourself a little bit of research on Twitter, and you type in Jaylen Warren, the people in Pittsburgh have been really hyping him up a lot. It seems like the offense in Pittsburgh is looking at ways to get him on the field, both as a slot receiver, slot weapon, but also in 2-back sets with Harris on the field. So for as much hate, I guess you could say, that Najee gets for being inefficient, but just being like a stat hog, but an inefficient stat hog. Jaylen Warren, to me at least, he seems like he's kind of like the antithesis or the opposite of that, where he might not fill the stat sheet weekly, but he's very efficient when he does. So if you do have Harris as one of your first picks in the draft, maybe getting Warren towards the end would be a really good idea. And you certainly can do a lot worse, I think, at the end of your drafts.
This is an incredibly sneaky pick, Zach. Like this one, when you put in the docket, I was like, I like this one a lot, especially if you are somebody that is a 0 RB drafter. You cannot leave the draft without this player as a 0 RB drafter, because I think honestly he's going to have standalone value. Like Zach mentioned, if you took Harris, this is a good guy to pick up at the end of your drafts as an insurance policy. I think he's going to have standalone value as well. So if you're a 0 RB drafter, this guy is a guy that you can get, like Zach said, as the RB 50 that you can throw on your roster, and I think you could plug and play him throughout the season. Going into our final players, Armand, do you want to share your third and final breakout player?
All right. So my third and final breakout player, kind of like Zach's, where the local media is buzzing around him and it's starting to catch on in the NFL. And I'm going to give a little mini hot take here because I want to be ahead on this guy, because I was a little bit ahead. You guys can attest. He's on my taxi squad for Dynasty. I held him since last year. And that is Justin Ross, wide receiver for the Kansas City Chiefs. And he was coming into training camp as a guy that is on the bubble for even making the roster for the Kansas City Chiefs. But if you're looking at the hype right now, he is starting to become Patrick Mahomes' favorite target during training camp. And then you add in the fact that Kadarius Toney has gone down with injury, and Justin Ross's pedigree in college before his draft stock fell from a spinal fusion that he had to take care of. That just got teams scared of wanting to take a risk on him. He's a great player, and he's attached to Patrick Mahomes. I think that pedigree and his early breakout age from college, I think he is primed to break out this year. And my extra bonus hot take today is he's not going to be the passing option number one in Kansas City. That's obviously Travis Kelce, but I think he's going to be wide receiver one in Kansas City this year. I think he is the wide receiver to draft if you're trying to draft a Kansas City wide receiver, and you get him for really cheap right now yet.
Based on the news, I think you might be on the right path there, especially from what Sleeper's been pumping out the last little bit there, Armand.
Yeah, you wanna try and get on this before other people do. So check your dynasties, see if he's still available. And then if you're in redrafts, try and keep the hype down on him in your league so that you can still try and get him cheap, so you don't have to try and reach for him too much. But the hype is going up, up, up. So just continue to watch it, because if you saw that nasty route he did the other day, it was trending on Twitter, I believe, where he totally ghosted the DB and had time to wipe his hands on his towel behind his back before making the catch.
Yeah. I'm gonna continue on here with my second one, or my third one. I apologize. And my last one, almost similar to what Armand said for his second one. This is a late breakout. And it's almost a fantasy sleeper in the same sense. But the player I'm going to talk about here, this is now going to be his 7th year in the NFL, and was a highly drafted guy. And actually, my very first dynasty draft, I took over a team, and then it was the rookie draft. If my 201 pick, I took this guy, this running back. And since then, he's hit the waiver wire multiple times on different teams as an insurance policy. And that's Samaje Perine for the Denver Broncos. He was drafted originally from the Washington Redskins at the time. Has bounced around, was with Cincinnati, and now is going to be with Denver. And the part that makes this really interesting is if you would have asked the same thing again 10 days, 11 days ago, whatever it was, when the pup was released, Javonte Williams was a guaranteed line on the pup. His knee was destroyed. It's going to take forever to come back. And he has not been placed on the pup yet, which is surprising to me. Javonte Williams, for those of you that don't remember, had a catastrophic knee injury, like J.K. Dobbins style, who's still struggling with the knee injury several years later, catastrophic knee injury. So I expected for sure for him to miss time, at least for a few weeks, come back, not be 100% healthy, maybe healthy the following season, which would leave the doors wide open for Samaje Perine in this Denver offense. Now, flashback, I don't know how many years the listeners have been playing fantasy football for, but when Sean Payton was with the New Orleans Saints, you wanted his running backs. Didn't matter if it was a committee, didn't matter if it was a workhorse, whoever it was, you wanted the running backs because it was one of the, I think it was top 3 fantasy points per running back room for several years running. 1-1, 3-1, 2, something along those lines. So in a Sean Payton-led offense, you want the running backs, which if Javonte Williams is not healthy, Samaje Perine is the one. Even if Javonte is kind of healthy, he's not going to be the workhorse back because you're not going to give the reins to a guy that just had a catastrophic knee injury and is still kind of nursing it coming back. Now, kind of backtracking a few times here, Samaje Perine was very successful as well with the Cincinnati Bengals. Last season, he had a few actually very relevant weeks when you look at his production. In week 11, he had 28 points, which was, I think, the second highest other than the massive, ridiculous breakouts game or massive game of Joe Mixon. I think he had 4 or 5 touchdowns. 28.2 was the next best week of the running back room. And following that, he had 17.3, 18.5, and then 8, 2, 3, and then so on and so forth. So I think Samaje Perine is going to have an opportunity this upcoming season to show why he was so highly drafted in the past, because it didn't happen year one, and then he kind of got put on the back burner. And in his rookie campaign, which I mentioned was very disappointing, he had the most, he had the most rushing yards of his entire career in that, and it was 603. And after that, he had the injury 32. After that, it was 16, 301, 246, 394. But what he also does get done is in the receiving work, where last season he had 394 rushing yards, but he also had 287 receiving yards and 4 touchdowns with 51 targets, which is very, very good. So kind of a combination of everything right now with the Devontae injury question mark pup. We don't know that yet, but it seems very surprising that he hasn't been, with his capability in the receiving room, as well as a sneaky running back. And the Sean Payton offense, I think, screams value for Samaje Perine, and to finally have the opportunity to have a breakout. Even right now on some of the projections, they're projecting him to have 533 rushing yards and 296 passing yards, and that's with a healthy Javonte Williams. If Javonte misses time, those numbers are going to skyrocket. And I think he's going to have his career best season here, even though this is his 7th season in the NFL. Zach, you got to wrap this one up. You're third and final player.
All right. So Elijah Moore, currently being drafted as the wide receiver 48. You guys might remember Elijah Moore as somebody that was getting a little bit of hype around this time last year as a potential breakout player for the New York Jets. Unfortunately for him, the New York Jets didn't seem to know how to use him last year. And that's, evidenced by the fact that last year his points per game dropped from 10.6 in 2021 down to 4.4 last season. That has a lot to do with the players around him, Garrett Wilson coming in, but also the players that were at quarterback for the Jets, mainly Zach Wilson. There were a number of games, primarily that I watched against the Patriots, where Moore would be wide open and Zach Wilson wouldn't even look in Moore's direction. So I think the lack or the dip in production that Moore experienced last year wasn't so much to do with his talent or his ability, but more so with the offensive system and the quarterback for the Jets. Fast forward to this year, he was traded from the Jets to the Browns, and I think this is going to be his comeback tour, if you will. Already on Twitter, on other fantasy sites, Moore is getting a lot of buzz, a lot of conversations around how he might be comeback player of the year for fantasy. So I think we should all do ourselves a favor and keep our eyes open to see how he progresses through training camp and to see what he's doing come draft time, because this is somebody that at this time last year was getting a lot of buzz, redraft and dynasty. So I think Moore might be somebody that doesn't have the kind of impact that AJ Brown did when he went from Tennessee to Philly, but there could be a similar contribution where he comes to the new team and him and Amari Cooper have not the same, but like similar-ish impacts to what Brown and Smith had for Philly.
The funny thing is, last year I tried to trade with all this buzz. I tried to trade an early 2nd-round pick for Elijah Moore. Got denied immediately. Like, it was shut down. Now, I couldn't imagine, like, if you threw a 3rd at somebody, oh yeah, take him. Like, there's probably some teams that Elijah Moore might have hit in smaller leagues, might have hit the waiver wire, right? But I think that would be an exciting pick. I think that's a guy that's never got an opportunity. And it's funny because he was on the same team as Denzel Mims, who also never really got much of an opportunity either. So 2 guys leaving the New York Giants, and we'll see or New York Jets, sorry, and see what end up happening with their careers moving forward. So, wrapping this one up, I know there's a couple names in here too that a guy could talk about. There's some layup ones like a guy like Jamison Williams, even though he's missing a couple weeks due to suspension. Haven't got to see him yet, so you're obviously going to see that hopeful explosion from him in the Lions offense. Guys like Treylon Burks who injured their rookie campaign, and they're going to be able to take that massive step forward. And there's some layup names, but there's some deep dives in here too that I think we threw out. So some fun names as we lead into fantasy draft season, obviously throughout the rest of the training camp. So wrapping this one up, it is Armand's turn to share his hot take here. I know he hinted at it a little bit, but we got Armand's hot take coming up here. So I'll find the drop, and then we will get things started.
You're not on fire, Ricky Bobby.
I'm on fire!
Take us away, Armand.
All right, so my hot take kind of spurs from I was looking at the ADP and the draft rankings and stuff, and I think Cooper Kupp is too high. He's still living off the hype of that amazing season that he had, and gosh darn it, it was an amazing season. He was a fantasy league winner that year, but I think everyone's expecting him to come back this year again, just like last year they were expecting it, and put up the same stat line and be just as good. And I think he's going a little bit too high. So it kind of inspired me to go a little bit more ice cold and spicy hot with this take. And instead of just saying Cooper Kupp isn't going to be a top 5 wide receiver, I decided to look at the 5 wide receivers that I think are going to finish ahead of him. And that's not to say I think Cooper Kupp's going to be wide receiver 6. I think he's overrated, and I don't think he's going to be a top 5 this year. Might even be lower than that. So my top 5 wide receivers this year that I am predicting it is going to be, and I'm going to try and put them in order here. I'm going a little bit of a homer pick here. Last year was ridiculous at the stats. I don't think he's going to quite reach that level, but I think he's going to remain the wide receiver 1 this season, and that is Justin Jefferson, wide receiver 1 this coming season. Wide receiver 2 this season, I'm a little worried about it with the Joe Burrow news, but I think he's still going to finish it as the wide receiver 2, and that is Justin Jefferson's college teammate, Jamar Chase. Wide receiver 3 is our offensive rookie of the year last year. He now has a QB that is head and shoulders above his QB from last year, and that is Garrett Wilson is going to be the wide receiver 3 this year. Just you guys watch. Wide receiver 4, he's been in the top 5 before. He has the talent, and now he's with a up and coming quarterback that Jordan even talked about, and that is Calvin Ridley. I think he's going to crack the top 5 this year in his first year back. He's ready to go. He's got something to
relax. Zach's hot and bothered. Relax, Zach.
And then my 5th wide receiver. This one, it was between a few guys. I had a tough choice here to make for wide receiver 5 this year. Some honorable mentions. It was like CeeDee Lamb was in the mix here for me, and a few other guys along that line. Jalen Waddle, Tyreek Hill, I was kind of thinking about, but I ultimately landed on A.J. Brown. I think Jalen Hurts is going to take another step forward in his passing, and that's just going to help Brown and Devontae Smith even more. And Brown was definitely the guy you looked for a little bit more last season and was a little bit more consistent, putting up points throughout the year. So A.J. Brown will be my 5th wide receiver. So that is my ice cold hot take. I'm trying to predict the top 5 wide receivers this year, and then I even tried to put them in order. So that's, to recap, number 1, Jefferson, number 2, Chase, number 3, Garrett Wilson, number 4, Ridley, and number 5, A.J. Brown. Also, honorable mention JC to St. Brown. I even considered him, but couldn't quite do it.
First, there's a couple of guys. Well, I mean, it makes it hot. So there's a couple of guys I think you left off. But throwing shade at Cooper Kupp is just a damn shame, Armand, because that's a direct reflection on Matthew Stafford and my most recent trade. So I'm just gonna leave it at that. Any 2 cents you want to add into that one there, Zach?
I very surprised that Calvin Ridley made that list. Armin, if you have that strong of a sentiment about Calvin Ridley, we are open for business.
I was like,
send me some
20.
offers here, Zach. Send me some offers.
I actually have him ranked as the top 20 guy, Zach. That's what I'm going to try and buy him at. But then he's going to finish as a number 4. So
yeah,
anything's possible. Okay, before we wrap this up here, we are right around the corner here. Obviously, like I mentioned, we are in training camp season, which means we have preseason football coming up right away, which means we have regular NFL coming up right away. So we're right around the corner here, you guys. Podcasts are going to be coming out fast and furious. We still got a couple fun ones left to do, and then we'll get into our pre-fantasy draft season, where we get into some rankings, where we get into some buy low candidates, kind of a little bit like we did today. And then we get started with charity league, and then it's the fantasy season, where it's week 1, week 2. We're getting back into the nitty gritty. So it's gonna be a fun time of year here. We're super excited. Fantasy football is here. We're back and we're talking. We're excited. This is a good time of the year. So if you are interested, like I said at the top of the episode, if you're interested in the fantasy football charity league, message us if you have some recommendations for some changes in the league or anything that you think would be a fun addition. Let us know, and then we'll start putting that poll out there for people that are interested to join. So without further ado, that wraps up episode 90. Thanks for listening, everybody. Take care, and we'll talk soon.